we're going to move on to our next topic. Josh Jacobs is unlikely to report to training camp anytime soon. This was a report that I believe came out last week or just a couple days ago, right as training camp was about to begin. I think Josh Jacobs was in the parking lot with Max Crosby,
Yeah.
and they couldn't get a deal done. So Jacobs just decided to pack it up, and he's not going to practice.
Yeah. He's holding out, you know. And what's interesting to me, I mean, it makes sense and it was expected. Okay. I fully expected him to hold out. So long as they didn't come to an agreement on a long term deal. Was there another comment?
Oh, there is another comment, but finish your thought. We'll get to the
Yeah,
comment
because
after.
we just started the topic, so yeah. Um, yeah, I expected to hold out unless a long term deal happened, and it didn't happen. They made it sound like it came down to the wire, but I don't know about that. Why would it come to? I don't know. That's just why would it come down to the wire? Like you had all that time to do contract talks. Why does it have to come down to the wire? Why couldn't you guys have, if they really wanted to get it done, couldn't they have done it like a week before the deadline? You know, hey,
Mm-hmm.
let's iron this out today before fucking practice starts and everything. It's like I don't know. It sounds to me like maybe the Raiders weren't too keen on having a long term deal with high, um, for one thing, high yearly
High guaranteed
salary,
money.
but guaranteed is the big thing. So I don't think they were too big on that. And like our friend Tyler said in our fantasy group chat, McDaniels is from that Patriots system where they don't pay running backs. You know,
Mm-hmm.
they just that's the history they've had. They don't pay running backs.
They
So
don't really pay anybody, to be honest.
yeah, which should explain the Renfro rumor from earlier. It like here and there they'll pay a top tier player. So like when they got Randy Moss, right? Like
Mm-hmm.
that's like your Devonte Adams. Uh, and then like Max Crosby, it's like no brainer, right? But other than that, I don't expect many huge contracts unless somebody really deserves it. Like in 4 years, if Tyree Wilson really deserves it, cool, right?
Mm-hmm.
Um, but yeah, I wasn't really getting my hopes up for a long term deal with Jacobs. I was kind of hoping for something that just was right in the middle where it worked out for Jacobs and it worked out for the team. But you run that risk with running backs if they get hurt. It's like, dude, that hurts the team a lot. To pay
Mm-hmm.
them what was reported to be possibly $12 million per year. There's a report from Dov Kleiman that the Raiders made a $12 million per year offer to Josh Jacobs, and this is per Mike Garafolo. So it's a little funny to me. Like, okay, there's a whole thing behind this. First off, who leaked this? Was this the Raiders just trying to like, oh, we tried, Raider fans? There was no need to put this out. So I'm sure, it was Mike Garafolo doing a bunch of digging. I don't know. But why do you have to put out the information that, well, I mean, we tried with Jacobs? It's just going to make Jacobs get even more upset, which he actually put out a couple of subtweets, I want to say, like today. So, it's just not smart. But $12 million a year is no chump change. That's more than what Saquon Barkley got the other day. The deadline came and passed for Saquon to get a long term deal, and then like the next morning, he signs an updated 1 year deal with the Giants, which is just a little bit above the the franchise tag number. The franchise tag is like $10.1 million.
Mm-hmm.
Saquon signed for like 11.2, right? There's like incentives involved, 1 year deal. Oh, cool. There's like $2.5 million signing bonus, which I don't think he would have got with the franchise tag. Okay, that makes sense to me. I would really like for the Raiders to say, "Oh, we should copy that and offer that to Jacobs." For all I know, maybe they did, and maybe it works. But if they actually made a $12 million per year offer to him and he said no, unless the guarantees were absolute dog shit, I don't see why he would say yes to a 1-year $11.2 million deal or whatever it is. He's probably looking for $13 million a year, and they're probably not going to give that to him.
I would take 12 if I was him, to be honest, because like a guy like Christian McCaffrey, who's like, at the top of, who's like one of the top weapons in football. I think he's making like 15 or 16 million. So it's just kind of the market of like running backs. I think, maybe a guy you can compare him to would be a little bit closer to maybe Derrick Henry, where they just, they're running straight in between the tackles, not necessarily like a gadget player. How much does Derrick Henry make per year? That's a great question. Derrick.
Yeah, you can look that up. My issue with McCaffrey and Derrick Henry are that they are older than Jacobs. Like, I think Saquon Barkley is the perfect example of where Josh Jacobs' value should be at because they're around the same age. I want to say Jacobs is a little younger, and
I think Jacobs is younger.
Yeah,
but I think Saquon's
say,
just a better football player. But Jacobs has proven that he can stay healthy more.
For the most, yeah. I mean, Saquon's had the big devastating injuries, but there were a few times, in previous years where Jacobs would have occasional ongoing injuries, and then missing practices, occasionally missing a game. But the reigning rushing champion, he feels he's worth quite a bit, and I don't blame him. I've said many times in this podcast that I view him as one of my favorite players, so I'm rooting for him. But like I said, my issue with comparing him to McCaffrey or Derrick Henry is Derrick Henry's towards the end of his prime, and McCaffrey is 27 when Jacobs is probably 25 right now, which is in real life, it's not a big deal or not a big difference. But in the NFL, when it comes to making contracts, it is, because McCaffrey is probably on the second out of 3 years or whatever on his contract, whereas Jacobs is trying to move into the first year of probably a 3-year deal. So when that contract ends, he'll be 27. McCaffrey's 27 in the middle of his current contract. Like, it's just different.
Mm-hmm. This is a very interesting comment. Hefe KC says he would sign Dalvin Cook and Kareem Hunt and trade Josh Jacobs. If you can sign both those guys for less than what you would, sign Josh Jacobs for, just by himself, you get both of those guys. I would take both of those guys because, like, all it takes is Josh Jacobs. I mean, God forbid, it's much more risky to put all your eggs in one basket than to have them in two. And Dalvin Cook and Kareem Hunt would be two pretty solid baskets, I would say. That's a pretty good 1-2 punch.
Yeah. I somebody recently just said that maybe there's like a 80-85% chance that come week 1, right before week 1, well, and now we disagree.
Okay, there are certain things I think Dalvin Cook is better at. I think he has more explosive runs, and maybe I don't know, maybe a little bit more shifty, but Jacobs has younger legs, and he's got a lot more left in the tank. And I also think he's the more physical runner.
Yeah. I mean, I'm curious what Dalvin Cook's contract had him at this year that the Vikings decided wasn't worth it to them,
Mm-hmm.
But, he's probably going to sign with a team like the Jets and be the 1B. I just think that's where Dalvin Cook's at, whereas Jacobs is, again, defending rushing champion. And he's a very hard runner, but he's also a very elusive runner. Like, I think Jacobs is a very great all-around back. I think in his prime, Dalvin Cook was, and probably was slightly better,
Mm-hmm.
That's probably true.
Like I said, I think Cook is more explosive, but I think what happened in Minnesota is just that the Vikings have their coach and play calling system where they want a game plan against, around Justin Jefferson. And I think they're looking to just be a pass first team. So they don't really have, it's better to get rid of a player 1 year early than 1 year too late in terms of like the business aspect of the game. So I think that's why they got rid of Dalvin Cook, because they're like, Cook is just slightly better than Alexander Madison, or maybe, he's better. They just think that he's just flat out better. but they want to be able to pay a couple guys and structure the team a little bit catered towards what their offensive scheme is going to be.
Yeah, I think you said Dalvin Cook is more explosive than Jacobs. I think he was more explosive than Jacobs. You know,
I think
but I
we'll
don't
find out
think
this year, because Cook would just have some plays. I know this because I had him on my fantasy team. Dalvin Cook, he would just be having a mediocre day, and then all of a sudden he would break out for like a 60-yard touchdown, and it's like, all right, I had a good week out of him, and then everyone else sucked, and then I was
and that is the thing that separates them. I'd say maybe still, but probably mostly before, is that Dalvin Cook had like the breakaway speed. I don't really think Jacobs quite has that. I mean, he had that overtime run against the Seahawks, but usually otherwise he doesn't get like the big long runs where he separates from the entire defense.
Yeah,
Cook's
he's just like
contract,
no, go ahead.
Cook's contract is a 5-year, $63 million deal that is fully guaranteed. His average salary is 12.6, and the contract contained a 15.5 million signing bonus. I'm assuming this is his last deal with the Vikings. That's crazy. So running backs have like depreciated. How is Saquon signing an 11.2 or whatever it was $1 million 1-year deal?
Because
That's crazy.
Saquon missed like 2 years, didn't he?
Yeah, but like Saquon's better than Dalvin Cook.
Yeah, well, yeah, but you have to see the field, and it's like, I guess the team they're just sort of looking out for like, all right, we're gonna pay this guy. This guy's earned this money, but going forward, he might have another season where he misses time, and so they don't really see the investment there. So I think they put him on a 1-year deal to just sort of cover their asses in case he doesn't stay on the field. If he does, maybe they'll sign him to longer term deal. But at the same time, it's like that's another year that he gets older.
Yeah,
and more mileage that he has. So
and
it's kind of weird to see what's going on with the running backs. But I understand it's like you don't want to invest too heavily into one guy.
Yeah. Again, it's hard to invest long term in a running back. I will give Hefe this about Dalvin Cook and Jacobs. I think if you're like looking at their primes, Dalvin Cook was absolutely the better running back if you look at it overall, right? But I think like right now, like okay, if we can trade Jacobs and get something solid for him, like maybe that's the problem with the running back value nowadays. It's like a team will probably say, I don't know, I'll give you a third. And it's like, I'd probably just rather keep Jacobs.
Mm-hmm. This is also, it's a very true comment, but I would say having if you do have an elite quarterback, you definitely want to have a good running back to pair up with them. Cause I mean, unless you're the Kansas City Chiefs, you probably want a balanced offense, or unless you're the Buffalo Bills.
Yeah. Which I mean, that's where I would decide like, I'd rather have Jacobs, But again, if we can trade him and get maybe a second round pick or maybe a good defender, plus a pick, that's where I'd be like, let's trade Jacobs and then let's go with either. I don't think they'd sign both, but if you can get either Dalvin Cook or Kareem Hunt and pair them with Zamir White, and then you use like Amir Abdullah as like the pass catching running back, and then a little bit of Brandon Bolden. Apparently, like I'm fine with the running back by committee. That's usually what McDaniels did. So, and that's what I kind of expected last year was like 70 Jacobs, 30 Zamir White, and it ended up being 99 Jacobs and 1% everybody else. Because they were running him into the ground because he's at the end of his contract and they don't intend to keep him for long term. That's how I took it. So I think what they'll probably do is they'll just be like, hey, let's see what Jacobs decides to do this season. Is he gonna? It wouldn't make sense for him to hold out. We've already seen Le'Veon Bell try that, and it didn't really work for him. So all he did was lose a year of money, So I think what Jacobs has to do, I mean, really what this comes down to is that the franchise tag just isn't beneficial for players. It really should be eradicated at some point in the collective bargaining stuff down the line, but
Yeah,
he needs to
I don't
play.
think I've never heard a player be happy after being franchise tagged, even if they're
Not,
getting like top of the line money. I think
yeah,
all the players just kind of want to have that security.
you would have to be a player that isn't a top 5 player at the position to be happy with it. But even then, you'd have to be like, well, I want a long-term deal. Like, I don't want to get injured in training camp. Like we've heard 2 guys get injured today, Jalen Ramsey and Joe Burrow, which luckily Joe Burrow's sounds like it isn't a big deal, but Jalen Ramsey, he might be out till December, It's like, imagine if he was out for the year and he was on a 1-year deal. It's like that completely wrecks his value, right?
Speaking of franchise tags, do you know one player that comes to my mind the Niners use their franchise tag on? They actually used it on Robbie Gould a couple years ago.
No, yeah, I've seen it be used on kickers. It makes sense because you're not paying kickers that much. That's why paying or giving a running back a franchise tag makes sense to me because it's a 1-year deal, and running backs aren't getting paid that much. So it's like, oh, we don't mind paying $10 million, but it's better than 13 or 16 or whatever,
Mm-hmm.
So
Yeah, but going back to the whole Josh Jacobs thing, I really think that the situation is really, I mean, it kind of boils down to this. The Raiders are probably not in win now mode based on their current roster construction. I think they're still sort of rebuilding the team that they want to have under Josh McDaniels. So I think that they're kind of in a situation where it's like, Josh Jacobs, if we can't get you under the number that we feel comfortable getting you at, or, under the terms that we feel comfortable at, you can just sit out the season because you know what? We might just lose anyway. So if we don't have to handcuff ourselves to you, you know, that's probably what they want to do.
mm.
So they sort of have leverage in this situation. And Josh Jacobs, the only thing that he has leverage about is that he is going to be able to preserve himself. The Raiders won't get anything probably. Well, I guess the Raiders could trade him, huh?
Yeah, they could theoretically trade him, but it comes down to value, And I think my thing is, again, I don't think Jacobs would sit out the entire year. Maybe he sits out.
That's
maybe.
great.
Yeah. Well, I was gonna say, the Raiders right now are in win as much as you can mode.
Yeah. the Raiders are in. It's okay, Rocky. Take your time.
Yeah, I think the Raiders, in my opinion, are in a position like the Falcons were when they had Marcus Mariota at quarterback.
Yeah.
I think give it a year, maybe they can draft a guy next year, but I don't know because they might view, Garoppolo much higher than the Falcons did Marcus Mariota, and hopefully he succeeds, but we'll see. It's just in this fucking division. Good luck. But I think the Falcons can do something this year, namely because their division is kind of dog shit compared to our division. But I think they can end the entire conference is attainable in the NFC, other than the Eagles and the Niners. In my opinion, the 3rd seed is attainable for teams like the Lions, the Falcons, the Saints, right? The Vikings. It's right there. Whereas like the Raiders, it's like, okay, we have Hefe's Chiefs. I hope we're saying your name right.
Yeah.
We
Is
have
it
the Chargers
Hefe or Jeffy? Let us know in the comments.
Yeah. The Chargers, and then sneaky, like I guess you could call them sneaky scary, but just more like sneaky on paper. The Broncos. It's like everybody and their mom views all 3 of those teams better than the Raiders. It sucks. But we'll see. I just think they're 1 year away from hopefully making a big difference. Oh man, I would kill for it. That was one of the things I said.
Oh, yeah, Chiefs in Spanish. Yeah.
Oh wow.
Yeah, so it's Hefe. So I've been pronouncing it right this whole time.
Makes sense.
I just wasn't sure. It's like, because you've got the picture of Mahomes. I was I assumed it was Jefe, but for all I know, you could be like, yeah, my name's Jeffy. I love the Kansas City Chiefs. Fuck the Raiders. Fuck the Niners. You know what I mean? Like,
Yeah.
for all I know.
But yeah, I mean, back to Caleb Williams. I mean, I would kill for that. That was in our first episode of the podcast. I said I hope the Raiders are trying to. I mean, I'm not tank, but I hope that they can trade up to the first or second pick and get one of the top quarterbacks and just go.
And bench them for a couple years.
No,
And,
I
and
like
run
I
them up the
said,
middle like a fullback.
yeah, Trey Lance. But I want the Raiders to get a rookie quarterback that can. I'm not even asking for Mahomes. Like, I'm just asking for like Kyler Murray, healthy Kyler Murray. Give me that. Give me a good defense. Maybe a team like the Chargers and the Broncos fall off, right? And then it's just hopefully the Raiders and the Chiefs, and the Raiders just need to be the 5th seed, right? And then it's like, hey, anything can happen. That's all I'm asking for. But
yeah, but
anyways.
In terms of Jacobs, I think we're ready to move on to our next topic.